Hello, and welcome to the Impact Africa Training of the Trainers course. This recording is on problem-based learning discussion, and this is the first of two videos on this topic. After this session, my hope is that you'll be able to define problem-based learning and discussion and outline key formats. And in addition, that I hope that you'll be able to identify strategies on how to lead and troubleshoot problems that are associated with running the discussion. Before we proceed, take a pause and answer this question. What does a PBLD mean to you? And if you've had past experiences running a PBLD, what were the issues that you encountered? I asked this question so that you'll be more intentional about reflecting back on your previous experiences, and as we are sharing concepts that might be new to you, figure out how to incorporate them in your future practice. Here's my roadmap. I will spend a few minutes discussing what a PBLD is and in what circumstances this specific instructional methodology is helpful. And then we will spend a few minutes discussing strategies on how to lead a discussion and how to troubleshoot. So, a problem-based learning is a student-centered pedagogy in which students learn about the subject through the experience of solving an open-ended problem that's found in a trivial material. A problem-based learning process does not always focus on solving a problem with a defined solution, but that it allows for the development of other desirable skills and attitudes. These are, as an example, reflective thinking, enhanced group collaborations, as well as better communication skills. It helps students apply theoretical knowledge to real-life scenarios, and the process allows for the learners to develop the skills for their future practice. It enhances critical appraisal, it enhances literature retrieval, and these processes will encourage ongoing learning within a team environment. So what are the advantages of using problem-based learning instructional methodology? One is that it utilizes realistic clinical scenarios where you don't have to worry about hurting patients. The second is that you can coordinate with your other lectures, and you can use this to help provide clinical applications for the topics that you're covering. The third is that it encourages case ownership and independent thinking with your students. And then lastly, as an educator, it allows you to assess gaps in knowledge and thought process of your students and help guide them in developing those skills. It is important to consider how a PBLD is different from traditional learning. One difference is that instead of teaching concepts and material and then the students apply the knowledge to the problem, what a problem-based learning does is it provides the problem first, and then the students must then gather the knowledge to answer the question. And as the learner works to solve the problem, he or she uncovers the concepts that they need to learn in the material. This usually serves to motivate students, and that students know how and why they are asked to learn the new knowledge. And by learning the material in the context of a real-world problem, the students are more likely to be able to recall the knowledge later when they are faced with the problem in their clinical practice. So, what is the format of a problem-based learning discussion? There are different versions of this. There's no one-size-fits-all, but I'll share with you one version. And depending on what you are creating this for, you can modify the format to meet your needs. Here's a picture of one PBLD that I took out from the Impact Africa Learning Management System. It's a 4-page long document, and I'm sure you can't read it, but I'll zoom in and show you some of the key components to help us understand the format of the PBLD. So a typical PBLD should have 3 sections. It should have an objective section, a case section, and a discussion section. And let's go over each of these. Just like every other instructional methodology you have seen us cover in this course, a PBLD should have clearly stated objectives. Your objectives should be clearly defined and should have a goal using verbs to describe what the learner should be able to do by the end of the exercise. These objectives should be informed by your target audience and what their level of training is and what they already know and so forth. So on our example, using the topic cirrhosis, liver surgery, and anesthesia, here are what our objectives are. So you can clearly see that we have clearly stated 3 objectives that we hope our learners will achieve by the end of the problem-based learning exercise. So next is the case. The case can be hypothetical, but hopefully it will reflect the typical case that would be encountered by the target audience. You would want the case to unfold gradually, meaning that you would want to give some information about the case, followed by some questions, then followed by more information about the case. And you would want to use open-ended questions initially, which allows the students the opportunity to apply their knowledge and make decisions, teaching them themselves as they do that process and each other throughout the process. So let's look at one example. Here is the first information that you would provide. You are preparing your room for the first case of the day. A 6-year-old female is scheduled for umbilical hernia repair. You have obtained your drugs and are beginning to do your machine check. So following this, then you ask the question, what are the basic components of a full machine check? And how do you check the pipeline pressure? Now, after that, you give more details. During your check, a student comes into the room and notices that when you turn the machine on, oxygen starts flowing through the flow meter and it does not stop. Similarly, when nitrous oxide flow is increased, the oxygen flow increases automatically. Notice that we didn't give this second portion of patient information at the beginning. The reason for that is that we can have the students think and answer the open-ended questions of what components of a full machine check. Now, once they have done that, I'm ready to give them more information so that they can dig into more specific questions. Here's our cirrhosis PBLD example. The first line of the PBLD reads, a 52-year-old male with a past medical history of cirrhosis secondary to hepatitis C and subsequent hepatocellular carcinoma who presents for a right hepatectomy for resection of the hepatocellular carcinoma. So then you ask them the question, what is cirrhosis? What is a right hepatectomy? And describe the blood supply to the liver. So once you have allowed the students to think about these broad questions, then you'd give them additional information about the case. The patient arrives the day of surgery and you're assigned to provide anesthesia for this operation. Then you'd follow up with the question, what information you want to know preoperatively. So after that, after you give them that information, then you give them more information on the case. So the patient was appropriately evaluated before surgery with blood work showing a hemoglobin of this, platelet count of that, and additional information. Then you ask the question, what's the patient's estimated preoperative risk for the surgery? Are there contraindications to elective surgery? So I hope you guys, you can recognize that the questions are progressing. The questions we're asking as the case progresses tend to be more direct as opposed to the first set of questions which are open-ended. and that with each layer of additional information and questions, you are guiding your learners through the desired learning objectives. The third component of a PBLD is the discussion portion. The discussion is a review of the information that's relevant to manage the case. It is written in such a way that the students can read it after they have completed the exercise of going over the case-based discussions or problem-based discussions, and that the information they would need to answer the questions will be in this discussion portion, and they can use it for future reference. You want to make sure that when you write the discussion portion that you're not simply giving the answers to those individual questions, but that you cover the topic in more depth. This allows it to become more widely applicable than just the individual case that you have covered. You can also use illustrations and figures to help drive the concepts home. So, next question is, what cases should you use? This is obviously different based on the learners / the audience that you want to address. When working through creating a problem-based learning for less experienced learners, basic cases are fine. As the level of the learner or audience increases, so should the complexity of the case. A case can start to be simple and then gradually become more complicated as it progresses. It's a good idea to avoid rare zebra cases that the learner might never see in their clinical experience. The problem must be effective and interesting. It should engage the students' interest and motivate them to probe deeper into understanding the concepts that are being discussed. In addition, it should relate to the field of interest of the students that have personal stake in being able to solve the problem. Lastly, good problems also require students to make decisions or judgments based on facts and reasoning, and compels them to justify their decisions based on their prior knowledge or logical assumptions. So, let's look at 4 examples of cases. A 22-year-old male who presents for appendectomy. A 22-year-old male with sickle cell disease who presents for appendectomy. A 22-year-old male with sickle cell disease and known difficulty airway who presents for appendectomy. And a 22-year-old female with known difficult airway who presents for appendectomy, and she is 6 months pregnant. So, example A is a great case for a brand new anesthesia trainee, whereas example C and D would not be a good case for a new trainee, but might be a great case for an experienced learner. If the objectives of the problem-based learning, the objective of your problem-based learning also determines what case you use. If our desired objective is to learn about sickle cell, then examples B or C would be appropriate. But if our objective is to teach about difficult airway and obstetrics, then example C or D would be more appropriate. So, hopefully, I have given you some ideas to think about when and how to use problem-based learning instructional methodology, and some common thoughts about what the format should look like. This is the end of part 1 video. I hope to see you in the second video where I will address leading a discussion and troubleshooting issues. Thank you for your time.